Katia City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
Firstly, we're going to start off with the blowhard, Hurricane Helene, and thank you. Thanks, Ray. When Touch and I roll out of bed in the morning, we first thing we do is turn off the air, and then we go over and press a little rocker switch that makes a light come on over what is jokingly referred to as a kitchen, our Markland studio condo. And then we shake the little pot to make sure there's water in it and plug it in so that we can have hot water for our tea. Then we hook up the hot plate so we can cook our eggs, whether scrambled or boiled. And then we hook up the toaster because that's the foundation for the eggs. And then we open the refrigerator and pull some fruit out. If we're going to do a smoothie, then we pull some ice cubes out of the freezer. Then we may go over and check our phones, which most of you probably do, to see if we've plugged them in overnight. This morning, as a matter of fact, Touch had forgotten to put my phone in, so we plugged my phone in. We might use the microwave to heat something up. Later, we'll take a shower, and we make adjustments on the little heater thing. He likes it colder, I like it hotter. And then we may turn the TV on, so go to YouTube, which is one of my main music sources. Now that's a routine that we're in, and I'm sure as I was saying this, you're going through your own routine in your mind. So one of the things that's common to all the things that I mentioned in this routine is something that we take for granted, something we don't even think about unless we're paying the monthly bill, and something we become very dependent on: electricity. 6 days in the dark. Is that the first slide? Okay. Oh, no, that's not the first slide. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. All right. No, I don't think it was the first slide, but that's okay. Anyway, electricity is something we take for granted. And when you miss it, this original slide was different than this, but it's 6 days in the dark. I spent 6 days without electricity. Normally, if the electricity goes off for 15 or 20 minutes here in Pattaya, we start grumbling. Anybody grumble when the electricity goes off? Come on, let's see the honest hands. Yeah, we grumble. 30 minutes, it goes off, we grumble. So when it's off for 6 days, you're past the grumbling stage, and you're starting to do with the dealing stage, dealing with what's going on. Now, the culprit in all of this was a Category 4 storm called Helene. She was right at the door. And you know, from looking at it from this perspective, it's really pretty, isn't it? When you look down at it, it looks like a wonderful little flower with an eyeball in the middle. But if you were underneath that thing, even sitting right there, it's hell down there. All the corruption is underneath, not on the top. I knew that we were possibly having some trouble when I saw where this hurricane was headed. If you notice right there, and I'm going to try to use this little red thing. Yeah, it doesn't work. Okay, but you notice the storm is approaching the neck between the handle and the peninsula of Florida. That's not uncommon. I mean, when a storm comes in from the Gulf, it's going to hit anywhere between Texas and Florida, somewhere. But what was unusual about this was the 140-mile-an-hour hurricane was sitting right at the gateway and heading directly north, which means it was heading to where my son's house was. And so I knew that we possibly would have some trouble here. Now this slide is really a telltale slide. The one on the left is before the storm, and the one on the right is after the storm. Now, if this worked, I could show you. Yeah, well, it's not working. Okay, but the one on the left-hand side, the large group of lights on the left, that's Atlanta, Georgia. If you follow that up to the right, that lesser lights in the middle there is Greenville. And that's where I was, about 15 miles southwest of that spot right there. And if you move a little further along that line, right underneath the A under revealing, that is Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, if you look at the second slide, that is after Helene. And you'll notice that Greenville, the little light in between the two great lights that I talked about, where I was, it's almost disappeared. Just north of that light was Asheville, this little cross-like looking thing. Gosh, I wish I had this. This is really important. I can't believe it's not working. Okay, well, I can't see it. Oh, okay, all right. One of the things you'll notice that this up here is Asheville, this is Greenville, and this is where we were right about, this is where I was, right about here. You notice that Greenville is all but disappeared, Asheville has disappeared, and you notice this swath of black up from the coast all the way into this area and all the way up into western North Carolina. I think this is a wonderful telltale slide of how devastating the storm was, how many people were without power over that period of time. Why was I there? I was on a 3-week family vacation. I arrived on the 11th of September. I believe the night of the power off was the 19th. Now, you had the 25th, but I may be wrong on the 19th. And it was off for about 5 or 6 days, and the ended in the evening of the 25th. So that was the time frame, and that's where I was when she hit. Here's South Carolina, and you can see the southwest here. You can see where South Carolina is. I was in the far left-hand tip of that. That's where Greenville is. On the right-hand slide, you can see where Greenville is. Okay, this is the development that my son lives in. Let me see if I can get this to show. Yeah, okay. This, where is it? Where are you? Gosh darn it. I'm trying to. Okay, this is my son's house. His sister lives across the street, and my ex-wife lives right there. The reason I show this neighborhood is because down the end of this lane is where a big tree had fallen across the wire across both intersections here. And this is the main road in and out, but this is just a feeder road. This is a relatively new development, and what I mean by that, there was no mature trees. What was really damaging in this was the mature trees that had dropped. And wherever they dropped, that's what they destroyed. Whether they dropped on houses, whether they dropped on wires and roads and cars, that's where they dropped. But we had no mature trees in this area because it was 30 years, the neighborhood is about 30 years old. And everything else was underground, including the wiring. But I show you this because this area over here, where's the little red light? There it is. This area is where our power was off, and this was the Achilles heel for our electricity being off for 6 days. Okay, to orient you, again, I hope this works, but this is the neighborhood right here that I just showed you, and over here we had to get out the neighborhood this way. Over here is a shopping area. This is called Five Forks. And this building right here is a Publix grocery store where my grandson worked as early as 2 days after the storm came. It was the only shopping center open, the only grocery store open for 30 miles and for 2 days. So needless to say, they were out of everything. They sold all their ice, their water, their milk, everything. All the staples were sold out in 2 days, but they were busy as all get out. It was a perfect storm. The perfect storm, and the reason I say that is it rained for a whole day before the wind showed up. And what the rain did was soften the soil, okay? And a large tree has a great root system, but it's really dependent on the stiffness, the solidity of the soil that it's in. And so when the wind came, after the rain for about a day and a half, the wind came on that evening of, I think it was a Thursday evening it came, and the power went off about 5:14 in the morning. So that was a perfect storm sequence because what it did is it ripped up all the big trees. So you've got loose soil on the bottom, you've got a tall tree, and you've got leaves at the top that act like a wind sail, and that wind came in and just blew the trees over, all over the place. Now, if you were lucky, the trees were down in your front yard and didn't hit your house. If you weren't so lucky, maybe they fell across the road. But for sure, about 1.5 million, 1.7 million people in South Carolina were without power for about 6 days. A roadside scene, this is typical. There was a lot of electrical devices all over the road, which is why they asked people not to ride around, because there was a lot of loose and possibly active wires. It was estimated that in the Greenville area there's 4,000 poles down. And it took one crew that could do 3 poles per shift. So you can see, if you divide 3 into 4,000, that's an awful lot of shifts and an awful lot of time before the poles get fixed. A lot of fixing time, and the road travel was dangerous. Some were luckier than others, and you can see the guy on the left over here obviously was not lucky. I passed a house on a street, on a road leaving our community, and every single tree in his yard was down, but none of them hit the house. Okay, so this guy, maybe just one tree, and it hit his house, so he was not so lucky. Okay, what we didn't lose, we had water the whole time, and the water was usable. We did have the ability to cook because we had gas lines, and all we needed to use was a little sparker on the gas stove so we could cook stuff. We didn't have any major house damage. On the night that the storm actually blew in after the day of rain, I heard water leaking in the next room over, which was one of my granddaughter's room. I could hear it in the middle of the night, about 5 o'clock. It was going drip, drip, drip. So after the storm was over, we looked for the leak. We couldn't find it. So there was no major damage in the house. And there were no major damages to the family itself. What we did lose, we lost electricity and all that it does for us. You know, my little opening monologue, all those things that I did, all of those things were lost. Communications. All communications were out for 24 hours. And I'm talking about phone, internet, everything. Nobody talked to anybody for 24 hours. Verizon came back online within 24 hours. T-Mobile took 3 days. Okay, so picture yourself without your phone working, without internet, without anything for even a day. I challenge you to live a day without electricity here just to find out what it was like. You lost the ability to refrigerate, which is really important. That means anything in your refrigerator over 24 hours is probably going to spoil. Anything in your freezer over 48 hours is probably going to spoil. We threw a lot of food out, and I'm sure a lot of people threw a lot of things out. Lights in the bathroom, that's pretty self-explanatory, trying to find the toilet in the dark. Not too bad, because you edge over and you can feel it with your legs, so you sort of go. But, you know, there are other things you do in the bathroom that were not so easy to do. We had no hot showers. So I took 2 cold showers during that 6-day period. That wasn't fun. And normal sequences of working. You turn switches on. You're trapped in the habits of what you do. And you go on and turn switches off, even though you know the power is off. You sort of know the power is off, but you go and turn switches on. 3 times I went to the microwave to heat something up. And my daughter-in-law says to me, "Gramps, electricity's out." Yeah, okay, right, gotcha. Okay, what we did differently. We gathered many to eat. Days 1 and 2, all my family was over at my oldest son's house. I mean, the whole family. And they brought all of their perishables, whether they were eggs or meats or whatever, and we ate like kings for the first 2 days. We cooked everything that we had, everything that we knew we were going to lose. Days 3 and 4, power came on to some people. My second son's power came on, and he hosted us. Joshua's family, 3 or 4 other people. The pastor, who had just come back from a Western trip, came back to a house with no electricity and trees down all over the yard. He was invited, so there was about 20 people at my second son's house because they had electricity. And we watched a ball game, and we chatted with lights on over our head. It was a wonderful day. And then the day 4, another person's home got lights, and we went over there and invited ourselves for a meal over there. And days 5 and 6, thank God for pizza. Okay, what we did, we played a lot of board games. We played them by candlelight and some lanterns that we had. There were portable lanterns. And I remember the first night that the lights were out, it was such a festive atmosphere. It was like going out on a picnic. It was like going camping for the first night. You're really excited. You put the bonfire out. Everybody's excited about being out there. The first night was like we were at some kind of a carousel or something. And I thought to myself as I was sitting there, this will not last. And surely enough, after 3 or 4 days, that carnival atmosphere disappeared. We played a lot of board games. We played a lot of card games. We did a lot of riddle trivia games and a lot of chewing the fat. You get to talk a lot to each other. Actually, physically talk, face to face. It's really a nice thing to do. Okay, the challenges, obviously peeing in the dark. Lighted intersections without lights. It's amazing how many people forget that when the light goes out at an intersection, you treat it like a four-way stop. People are so used to the car in front of them moves, and you move right behind him. And of course, if you're waiting in line and doing the proper thing, you're probably going to run right into him. So lighted intersections without lights was challenging. Getting places was challenging, although I have to admit, most of the roads were cleared within 24 to 36 hours. Everybody went out there, and that was the primary thing: clear the roads and get power to the major intersections. Cold showers, well, I already mentioned that. So long without things that we took for granted. We realized how much TV you watch when there's no TV to watch for 6 days. Okay, so even though you have your device, and even though the internet came back after 3 or 4 days, it's still not quite the same. We did have a personal tragedy, and I think there are a lot of people that had individually more devastating time than we did. Everybody lost their power in that area, but some people lost a house, some people may have lost a car, some people maybe lost their lives. My great-grandson-to-be, he's going to get married to my oldest granddaughter in June. He decided that he was going to go after the big meeting that we had at my second son's house. He went home on his motorcycle, and he went down a road that I know he's been down before, even on getting there. And he went over a rise, and there was a log in the middle of the road. He was traveling between 70 and 80 miles an hour on a Kawasaki. Unlike most people in South Carolina has no motorcycle rules. You don't have to wear a helmet. You don't have to wear long pants. You don't have to wear a jacket. You can go out in a T-shirt, cut-off shorts, no helmet, and ride around all day on your Harley in South Carolina. However, my great-grandson-to-be doesn't do that. He's not a believer in that. So he had a very expensive helmet on. He had Kevlar vest on a Kevlar jacket that went all the way down, gloves, Kevlar pants, and $400 boots. When he hit that log and went over all those handlebars, those boots were ripped right off of his feet. He has a pin from his knee to his ankle in his left leg. They couldn't even operate on the right ankle. It was so swollen for 7 days. He was in a very expensive room, $5,000 a day, and who knows what the operations cost. But he discovered he didn't have any insurance. He thought he had insurance under his father's TRICARE policy, but they had never applied for it. So that's still in the work. It's possible that he could owe several $100,000. Okay, those were the challenges. There was a Tesla advantage. My son had a Tesla, and when you got a Tesla, you have a 100 kilowatt battery sitting in your garage. And that 100 kilowatt battery charged all of our devices, and all of the portable devices that you needed to charge, they charged them every night. My son only filled up one time from a charging station during that 6 days, but other than that, that battery was wonderful. If you've never been in a Tesla and enjoyed watching a car drive from point A to point B with nobody driving it, it's an amazing experience. It's quite a car. So he had a charger pack also in the car that he brought into the house for doing the same thing, charging stuff. He didn't need obvious stop for gas. All the gas stations within, I'd say, 36 hours were empty, okay, and people were waiting in line and whatever. There was a house battery pack. My son-in-law, married to my youngest daughter, got a Tesla battery that they sell as a house battery pack. He had it at his house, connected to solar panels, and when the power went out, his power did not go out. So a lot to be said for this technology. Final observations: if you tell people to stay home, they won't. Okay? Having had 4 children, if you say don't do something, that's an invitation to do it. And theoretically, you grow children up and you beat that out of them. When I say don't, that means don't. Well, a lot of adults didn't get trained well. And so they say, don't go on the roads, it is dangerous. My son was out of the garage within 5 hours on that Friday, the first day, because he wanted to see what the situation was on the road. Okay, so it's a natural tendency to rebel, and there's a lot of people on the road when they shouldn't have been. The other thing I noticed that people are inherently wanting to help others. Anybody, I would guesstimate that 90% of the people who had chainsaws were out clearing the road on the first day, clearing people's backyards, clearing local driveways. I mean, there's just this sense of wanting to help during a crisis, and we saw that significantly during this crisis. Local groups got to work fast. FEMA was late and intrusive, and I'll go into that personally if you want to hear why I say that. And they were broke when they got there because they had given so much money away to other things that were not associated with FEMA. Asheville, North Carolina, just north of our area, was devastated, and I have a couple of slides that I added to this. We are too dependent on electricity, and therefore we are vulnerable. We are too dependent on electricity, and I think our grid is one of the areas that we are vulnerable to attack from outside the country, even from within the country. We are too dependent, vulnerable, and 1.7 million South Carolinians. Most of the people my age, if you say, where were you when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was killed? Almost everybody knows, right? A little later in generations, where were you when the trade centers came down? Yeah, everybody can tell you. In this part of South Carolina, they're going to ask each other, where were you and what day was it that your power came back on? And that's going to be the call sign for this area for quite a while. Asheville, North Carolina is about an hour's drive north. The problem with North Carolina compared to South Carolina, it's in the mountains, okay? So there was significant damage in the mountains. I show you this because right in the middle, you notice there's roads coming in from the north, from the south, and from the east and the west. Right in the middle of there is Asheville. Up in the right-hand corner, and I'm going to try to get this to work, but up here, yeah, there it is. That's the reservoir for the place. That reservoir overflowed, and some of the places in this valley, most of the periphery around here is about 4,000 or 5,000 feet in elevation. Asheville itself was between 2,000 and 2,500. So within a short period of time, you got a bowl effect. Asheville's sitting in a bowl where all the water is dropping around. Some of the places around Asheville got 30 inches of rain in a 48-hour period. And all this rain came all the way down and sat right in Asheville. Asheville was unreachable by road for at least 10 days. At least 10 days. A lot of the people could only be reached by helicopter. It was really a devastating time. Whoops, wrong one. Okay, this is a clearer picture. You can see the reservoir up in the upper right-hand corner of the picture, and you can see all the roads coming in and out of Asheville, which is right in the middle. All these roads were cut. All the roads were cut. And any other smaller roads that led down from the mountain that brought people down into town, all of those were cut. Many of them washed away. I-40, which is a major east-west highway from the east coast to the west coast, I-40 was closed for more than a few days. Okay, so they were isolated. Okay, it's estimated that maybe up to 600 people lost their lives and $160 billion of damage. Okay, and the picture's worth 1,000 words. I think the one in the upper right-hand corner where the road is closed was probably the call sign for why it was so bad in Asheville. The water covered all the roads. There was no way in or out. Within 2 days, the water supply was contaminated, and obviously being isolated like that, they ran out of food very quickly. It was a really devastating situation for them. For us, down in South Carolina, the loss of power was inconvenient. For those people in Asheville, North Carolina, it was hurting badly. Okay, that's all I've got. Any questions? question. Oh, right here.
Was there an evacuation notice or any preparation?
You know, that's really an excellent question, and I can't answer it because I don't remember any being given. I think this storm, remember Greenville, North Carolina is called upstate, and it's at least 125, 130 miles from the coast. Usually when these hurricanes come up, they batter the coast, and the inland areas don't ever get hit. So I don't think anybody thought that this was going to be, we'll get a little rain, we'll get a little wind, no big deal. So no, it wasn't. And it wasn't in Asheville either. So good question.
Morning. Being from the United States, the thing that amazes me is how far from where the hurricane made landfall until it hits your place. Maybe you can talk about the logistics a little bit. So,
well,
you just said that it's 135 miles from the coast, but that's from the Atlantic side.
Yeah, it's from the Atlantic side.
Right.
That's not where yeah, it traveled 600 or 700 miles up to get to us.
Yeah.
600 or 700 miles.
Right.
It went all the way across. It went across the panhandle of Florida, across most of Georgia, and into the little tip of South Carolina that's called upstate, and it hit North Carolina. Once it hit North Carolina, it hit the mountains, and the mountains dumped the final quantity of rain, which is why it was so bad in Asheville. It was bad for us, but it was much worse in Asheville. After Asheville, we don't hear any more about the storm, okay? Once it went past Asheville, people just got regular rain and regular wind.
But the damage where it made landfill was probably even worse than where you guys were.
It depends. What happens here is depends on how fast the storm is traveling. Really, we could have been much worse off. It rained all day Thursday. The power went off that night, which would have been early Friday morning, and the rain stopped before Saturday morning. So really, there was only 48 hours of rain. The storm really passed us very quickly. Now think of the damage that could have taken place had the storm decided to sit over our areas for maybe a day. I mean, whatever the devastation was, it would have been twice as bad, even for Asheville or for us. So yeah, it was a quick-moving storm, but it went a long way, and it was a surprise to everyone that so far inland would be affected so badly by the storm.
Hey, Roger. That's Mike. I have a house in probably an hour, less than an hour east of your children's, your family's houses, and they were without power for about 5 days.
Yeah.
And they were still in South Carolina. They weren't up in North Carolina, so they were over Kiowa Key, if you know where that is.
Yes.
But I also just had lunch yesterday with some friends whose daughter or daughter-in-law was in Asheville, and she just got her power back on Monday.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So that's
reinforces,
about a month.
That reinforces my perception that Asheville was really badly hurt compared to ours was inconvenient, theirs was devastating. Okay, any other questions?
Firstly, Roger, that was a wonderful talk.
Thank
You're
you.
a wonderful speaker. But also, just a point that he made about electricity. We had a talk a couple of years ago about what can happen an electromagnetic pulse. Like, if they set off like a nuclear bomb high enough above the USA, it will put out an electromagnetic pulse which will fry all the electronics in the whole country, unless they're in a Faraday bag, which you can get quite cheaply online. And also, the recommendations were you should have an old-fashioned radio that what operates on batteries, right? And you know, also you could have and you can buy this from Lasada, like a little bit of solar cells that you can plug your phone into and charge them and stuff. Because communication is everything, right? Yeah. In terms of emergencies, it's everything. And your communication today was fantastic, Roger. Thank you. Got a little token of our appreciation. You have that for me. Thank you. Roger Fox. Yeah, I know. Oh, we've got to get the photo taken for posterity. Yeah.